Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, welcome back to Basketball Conference, the ACC football podcast. My name is Joey Weaver. He is Mike McDaniel. Mike, first question, as Mondays go, how would you say this one ranked?
Really, really good, Joey. Really good.
Yeah, not bad at all. Pretty cool legislation was passed by the Supreme Court that's very relevant to a lot of the interests, I'd say, of our listenership, if you would dare to go that far. So we're going to get into that here in just a moment, Mike. We've got a couple things to update on. But before we do, wanted to throw a quick shout out to a former guest on the podcast, friend of the show, Mr. John Casillo. You'll remember he is an author over at Troy Nunes is an Absolute Magician, nunesmagician.com on the SB Nation Network, covering Syracuse. He posted an absolutely touching tearjerker of a story today on nunesmagician.com, paying tribute to his brother who recently passed away of cancer. Thoughts and prayers with you, John. Really a touching, great story that you wrote. Our condolences are with you in this really hard time for you and your family.
Thoughts and prayers with John. Obviously second everything you just said. Nothing's ever easy when you talk about cancer, and obviously it's a really unfortunate thing. So thoughts and prayers with him. He's always been really good with us. I don't want to pretend like I know him really well. I don't, but every time I've, crossed paths with him, whether it's on here, coming on and graciously doing the podcast with us to preview or recap a Syracuse season, or with Mark Rogers, our buddy, on Mark Rogers TV. John's always been really cool and really good with us. So I just want to give him a quick shout out there.
Absolutely. We look forward to having you on, hopefully again in the future, John, sometime. But again, thoughts and prayers for your family. Mike, we did kind of schedule this podcast a little bit of emergency style. We talked a lot about all sorts of forms of gambling and bets and odds and wagers and everything on this show since we've been doing it for almost 2 years now. And there was a very, very important ruling that was dropped by the Supreme Court this morning, Monday, May 14th, that figures that it's soon to change the landscape of sports betting in the United States moving forward as we know it.
Just excellent. Everything about this is excellent, Joey. Where do we even start?
Hang on. I know where to start.
Go. Yes, sir. Crack open that brew.
We are celebrating. Yes, sir.
I have my I actually have a bourbon and Sprite because I ran out of Coke, but you make do with what you have. So that's what I'm drinking. It tastes I'd be lying to you if I said it was delicious, but it's something, and it's Monday, so cheers, Joey.
Dilly dilly.
As we take a sip out of that lovely concoction. So the Supreme Court rules today by a Supreme Court ruling today 7-2 on the vote to strike down a federal law prohibiting sports gambling federally. This comes from a 1992 law that barred state-authorized sports gambling with some exceptions. Now, of course, the states are going to regulate the sports betting. So it's going to be a state-by-state issue, and that'll be hammered out here in the coming months and years ahead. But this is the first step, Joey, towards legalizing sports gambling once again in the United States, which is an idea that I know you and I can both get behind as proponents of college football gambling for sure, and you and I both dabble in other sports as well. So I have nothing but good things to say about this. You and I have talked about this in the past on this podcast, saying that we wish that it was regulated because, we think that, with all of the things that are done both offshore and under the table with bookies, you might as well just regulate it. Congress, government takes its cut and, it'll be taxed and whatnot. But I think it's a lot better option than what's currently happening with millions of people across the United States using bookies under the table and offshore means to do their sports gambling. I don't have a bookie. I'm an offshore proponent. Now I'm an onshore proponent, certainly. Hopefully Virginia moves to legalize this. That way I can bet on college football in my state. That would be very nice.
Mm-hmm.
Instead of using Bovada, which, shout out to Bovada, you've been great, but a little bit sketchy, especially when you're trying to withdraw money. So
Mm-hmm.
nothing but good things to say about this, Joey. It's a really exciting day. Like you've said, there have been worse Mondays for sure. This news broke, about mid-morning Eastern time, so I've been reading up on it all day. It's really exciting stuff. I don't know if Virginia is going to legalize it or when they legalize it, but hopefully they move to do that so that I can bet on my Hokies and any other team that I choose to roll the dice with.
Yeah, absolutely, Mike. I would say the only real downside that I'm aware of in terms of this whole the news that dropped is I was on my way home from work and I stopped to go get gas and I went into the cashier and I said, "Hey, can I get $20 on pump 10 and $10 on the Rockets to cover tonight against the Warriors?" And it's not that easy. It doesn't work that way. As you were kind of alluding to, the Supreme Court ruling does not mean that everybody can just go bet on sports everywhere already. It's more that it paves the way for states individually to legalize gambling within their own boundaries. So each individual of the 49 states other than Nevada now get the choice to decide whether or not they want to legalize sports betting and build their own laws around that. So there will be a little bit of a wait here. I know that there are a couple of states that are very much on the doorstep already, and then I've heard some rumors that potentially trying to get this done by the NBA Finals, but certainly by the time football season comes around, looking to get some legislation in place to where they can have some legal sports betting in their states. There are other states that are going to take significantly longer. I have a bad feeling about my state. I live in Texas. They typically have not really been all that conducive to anything gambling-wise, so things are probably going to take a while here. However, I do live kind of near Louisiana, and Louisiana's laws in terms of alcohol are pretty hilarious. So I'm guessing the sports gambling laws won't be a whole lot far behind that.
It's basically Texas, Louisiana's like kind of Texas.
Yeah, I mean, well, especially Houston. Houston's like an extension of Louisiana in a lot of ways. There's a bunch of oil and there's a bunch of Cajuns, and we do crawfish, and it's pretty much that. So, yeah, we'll see how that all goes and what all shakes out. But it sounds like there should be one or two listeners at the very least of our podcast that are living in states that will be legally betting on games come the season. So you'll get to lose all of your money on our ACC picks of the week for like legally. It'll be great.
It'll be awesome. It's good news for us. And I actually just pulled up an article that was written today, Joey. It's titled "Your State-by-State Guide to Sports Betting in Light of the Supreme Court Ruling."
Oh boy.
Now, let's go with three states, right? Let's go with the state of Georgia, because I know we have a lot of Georgia Tech fans. The state of Virginia, because I know we have a lot of Virginia Tech fans. Then we'll talk about Texas as well, Joey.
Sure.
Because, you live in Texas and it's conducive to you.
Mm-hmm.
So here we go. For Georgia, quote, "There is no pending legislation regarding this, and the next session to debate something like this," being this law, is in January of 2019, when Governor Nathan Deal will no longer hold office, says Jen Taliber Ryan, the Deputy Chief of Staff for Communications in Deal's office. So Georgia, nothing happening anytime soon. Next on the list, of course, would be Texas. It says Texas has not recently considered legislation pertaining to sports gambling. A spokesperson for Texas Governor Greg Abbott's office did not immediately respond to requests for comment on Monday's ruling. And then
You're really bringing me down over here, Mike.
And now I'm sorry.
Really bringing me down.
And if it makes you feel any better, I'm about to bring me down as well, because I'm about to read Virginia's.
Oh dear.
A spokesman for Governor not great. A spokesman for Governor Ralph Northam said, "We're reviewing the ruling and would review any legislation should the General Assembly decide to take up the matter. Currently, there is no active legislation that I am aware of on this topic." So, nothing active that would, bring the sports betting law to the table in the state of Virginia, but, they'll discuss it, I'm sure, in light of the recent news. So nothing imminent in Virginia, nothing imminent in Texas, and nothing imminent in Georgia. So we got three states covered and a decent amount of people listening to the podcast, both in Georgia and Virginia. And it's not great news for you in Texas, but hey, things might change. I'm just glad it's legal on a state-by-state basis. I think that's a start, instead of just federally outlawing it, which was basically the case with the exception of Nevada.
Mike, I'm putting a couple of pieces together in my head here, and I think what we're saying is that whenever we go do a basketball conference roadshow somewhere this fall, it probably needs to be Boston College.
I agree.
I think it needs to be Boston College.
Because we know Massachusetts is all over this.
They will, yeah, absolutely, no hesitation.
Yes. So for Massachusetts, already an active bill that would create a special commission to conduct a comprehensive study and offer proposed legislation relative to the regulation of online sports betting. Massachusetts is already like 3 steps ahead.
Oh, yeah.
Both them and New Jersey. And of course, Nevada, which has been in a pretty good spot for quite some time now. So, you know, we got to go to Boston College, right? And just be dudes up there because that's what we do.
Yeah. Massachusetts is that point of getting in the pool where the water is all the way up to your knees, but you're trying to like ease yourself in, but at some point you're going to get impatient and just jump.
Right.
Like I think Massachusetts is just waiting to jump right now.
Right. And Virginia, Texas, and Georgia are like, well, what is betting? Which is, you know, could be better.
Yeah, I'll agree with that. Mike, I thought of something interesting that I wanted to get your take on was now one of the key things here. Again, we've talked about the fact that this affects 49 states over Nevada, right? Nevada already had legal sports betting, at least in Las Vegas. My question to you is, 24 hours ago, I had said, "Hey, Mike, me and some buddies are going to Las Vegas. Want to see if you were in." Rate your interest level in going to Las Vegas, knowing that that's the only place in the country you can go bet on sports, and then compare it to your interest in going to Las Vegas, knowing that you could stay at home and bet on sports if it were legal in Virginia today. Let's just thought experiment here.
Right. I've never been to Las Vegas. That's
you're missing out.
Neither here nor there in this scenario, to be honest with you. My interest in going to Las Vegas would be a lot higher. Given that I can't legally bet in Virginia. Now, if I could legally bet in Virginia, it's like, oh, well, I'd go to Vegas because I'd never seen it before. But hey, if I can bet out of the comfort of my own home and my sole purpose of going to Las Vegas is to bet on sports, I don't really feel like going there anymore.
Yeah, and I think that what you said there at the end is kind of the key is you got to determine if your sole purpose for going to Vegas is to bet on sports.
Exactly.
And kind of where I was going with this is people were talking about this recently in the last couple of months is if something like this were to go through, does that have a negative impact on Las Vegas? I personally would say probably not really. Maybe at certain times like the Super Bowl or the Final Four or something like that, you know, you might have a bit of a letdown in interest in Vegas, knowing that folks are specifically interested in betting those events. But at the end of the day, there is so much to do and experience and see and eat and drink in Las Vegas that sports betting really almost kind of takes a back seat to some degree. I mean, there's, you know, the fact that there's the casinos and there's all the restaurants, there's all the experiences you can go have. There's still every reason to go to Vegas. And so my thought here was that if your interest yesterday in going to Vegas was like an 8, your interest today might be like a 7.5. Like it's maybe just like a minor hit that it takes, but overall you're still as interested as ever.
And to piggyback off of that too, there's a lot more gambling in Vegas outside of just sports, right? I mean, people go there, they bet the slots, they go and play blackjack and play cards. I mean, it's like anywhere else where you would gamble. It's just the awe of going to Vegas and experiencing that on a much grander stage than you would have really anywhere else in the country. So, you know, I think sports gambling plays a part into the awe of going to Vegas, but you know, if you're not into sports, you don't bet on sports, and you just want to go to, you know, you're going to Vegas for a bachelor party, you guys are going to the clubs, you're going to, you know, just gamble, play cards, whatever, you know, that is still on the table. The sports will still be on the table. So I tend to agree with you. I mean, I don't think this is, you know, this legislation state by state would be enough to like completely derail tourism in Vegas or anything like that, like some were suggesting. I think that's insane.
Mike, there's a very important piece of this that we need to talk about, and I think we've delayed it long enough. Last Friday afternoon, we got word that we got some ACC season win totals out. So
yeah, we did.
So if your state gets legal sports betting before the season starts, your season starts right now. We're going to talk about these win totals right here, right now, Mike. We got this is from Brad Powers at Brad Powers 7 on Twitter. He's a pretty big gambling guru for pregame.com, which is home of the famous RJ Bell. He lives out in Vegas. He's a very big sports betting guru, football in particular, if I'm not mistaken. Brad tweeted out ACC win totals from BetDSI last Friday. We need to run through these right now, Mike, because I've got very strong opinions on about 5 of these out of 14. Are you ready?
Go.
All right, let's start with the 5 that I feel the best about, starting with the most wins. All right. Clemson, the Clemson Tigers coming back from a playoff appearance. They got the whole defensive line back, basically everybody back. They're trying to figure out if they want to switch out one of their best quarterbacks in the country for a potentially higher ceiling freshman. All this, Clemson's win total, 10.5.
Over. Hit me.
Over.
Way
Absolutely over. And this is even on regular season. I cannot fathom Clemson losing 2 games this season with all that they bring back and all we've seen them do over the last couple of years, Mike.
Yeah, you're telling me that they can't go at worst 10-2, and if they do, you're telling me they don't have a chance to win their bowl game, right? To get to 11 and hit the over. I mean, give me a break. They're almost, in my opinion, unless there's major injuries across the board, they're almost a lock for more than 10.5 wins. I mean, I think they're 11 or 12 win team with the roster they're bringing back. They're going to be one of the most talented teams in the country anyway. And given their schedule, I mean, they should have the ability to get there. Not an impossible schedule by any stretch of the imagination. So it's going to be and another part of this too is, in my opinion, and we might end up being wrong, in September, October, November. We'll talk about it then. But I think the ACC Atlantic's going to be a little bit down this year. All the more reason to be confident with the over for Clemson there, 10.5, given who they got on their schedule.
Mike, that looked good before I was looking at their schedule. I'm looking at it right now. Find me 2 losses in this schedule. Ready? Furman at Texas A&M, Georgia Southern at Georgia Tech, Syracuse at Wake Forest, NC State at Florida State, Louisville at Boston College, Duke, South Carolina.
I'm still waiting for 1 loss.
I think your best chances to lose, I don't even know if at Texas A&M in game 2 under Jimbo Fisher is all that hard, or at Florida State in late October against a Willie Taggart team. I think at Florida State and maybe at Boston College, it could get a little weird towards late in the season. You feel like Clemson is maybe prone to drop a weird one somewhere, but I don't know that any of these teams I feel really good about on May 14th really giving Clemson a good shot here.
So what's their floor? Their floor is probably what? 3 losses total. Like, you lose 1 game against a good team, right? Like Texas A&M or Florida State. Then you lose a game you shouldn't. We're talking about like the worst possible scenario. A game against a good team, a game that you shouldn't, similar to Pitt 2 years ago, right?
Yeah.
So you lose a game like that, and then you lose a bowl game, right? Like, that's the floor for me.
Would be like 10-3.
Would be like 10-3, which I don't see happening. Because in my opinion, if they go to a bowl game with 2, like if they have 2 losses and go to a bowl game, right? They still might get into a New Year's 6 in that scenario, but they're not playing in the playoff. Then you have a pissed off Clemson team that didn't make the playoff playing against a pretty good Power 5 conference team that Clemson will probably be favored against, right?
Mm-hmm.
Even then, and that's coming down to the wire, they can get to 11 wins and hit the over. So I don't see it. I don't see a scenario, unless everybody's hurt and something crazy happens throughout the season, where they lose more than 2 games, in my opinion. And if that's the case, you hammer the over.
Mike, what's the one injury that will completely derail a season for a team?
Well, it's quarterback, and the argument for Clemson is that their starting quarterback, who was one of the best quarterbacks in the country last year statistically, might not be good enough to start this year.
Exactly. Their quarterback could get injured, and they got 2 more that might be just as good. Like, I have no fear here, and I mean, to me, I can't see it. I don't see. I mean, I think your worst case scenario is you drop maybe at Florida State, and maybe you find a way to lose at home to South Carolina at the end of the year. Rivalry games get weird, but yeah, I don't know, Mike. That's 10.5. I feel pretty good about that if I'm betting the over on Clemson right now, knowing what we know.
That's a big number. That's a big number too, 10.5. And you and I are sitting here saying, you know what? Like, lock it up.
Mm-hmm.
And that's saying something about the talent that they're bringing back, which we've already talked about at length. Yeah, it's going to be a really, really good Clemson team. Easily a team that can get to 11 wins.
Absolutely. All right, Mike, working our way on down. At 8 wins, trying to replace a former Heisman winner, the Louisville Cardinals. Under.
Under. Lock it up.
Hard under.
Yeah, lock that up. You telling me Jawan Pass is going to get this team to 9 wins?
He's got a 9-win name.
He
We'll
does.
go there.
Yeah. Scale of 1 to 10, he's got an 11 for a name. I mean, Jawan Pass, that's a football player. Jawan Pass, the quarterback, even better. So A+ name, not an A+ team though. Give me the under. I think that they can get bowl eligibility. I think it's going to be a down year. 6 or 7 wins, in my opinion, is the ceiling. I'd be surprised if they, if they pushed, I wouldn't be shocked. If they got to 8, anything more than that would be a major surprise for me. So I'd be pretty confident with the under here.
Man, they got to start the season against Alabama. They get Florida State and Georgia Tech in successive weekends at home. At Boston College, I think Boston College is better. Home against Wake Forest. At Clemson, they're gonna be lucky. I think if they're going over 8 wins or even pushing 8 wins. I think this is an under hard. And again, this is more of a question of how's the rest of the team rather than how good is Jawan Pass. Jawan Pass can be pretty good, and he ain't going to be good enough to save what is the rest of the Louisville team here.
Well, it's the same issue they've been dealing with for a couple of years now. The offensive line's not very good. The defense is shoddy at times, so it's going to be the same issue there for Louisville. It's just a matter of how does Jawan Pass adapt to what's around him. You don't have Lamar Jackson under center anymore, and that will make a difference.
That's right. Mike, moving on, going on down the list at 6 wins, bringing back most everybody, but more importantly, replacing a garbage defensive coordinator, Georgia Tech. Georgia Tech. Yeah. You're setting the over-under at 6 wins for an easier schedule when they were a remotely competent defense away from going like 8-3 last year. Alcorn State, at South Florida, at Pittsburgh, Clemson, Bowling Green, at Louisville, Duke, at Virginia Tech, at North Carolina, Miami, Virginia, at Georgia. I think there's easily 7 to 8 wins in there. They damn near beat a couple of those teams last year that you would think that they wouldn't really have that much of a chance against. And I think you put up just a passable defense, no pun intended there, just like a decent defensive scheme with a bunch of players that already kind of have shown that they can execute. I think that you're going to get much better results here. They bring back the quarterback, a lot of the skill talent on offense, a lot of the offensive line, everybody. I think Georgia Tech is setting up to be sneaky good, and putting the over-under at 6, I'm going over hard on that.
Yeah, you're bringing in Nate Woody to replace Ted Roof, which I know you're excited about. They bring back about half of their starters on defense, which is going to be good for them. The schedule, like you mentioned, I mean, there are a few tough games in there, but I see easily 6 wins, to get the push. And I think I'm with you. I'm in the same boat. I think 7, 8, 9 wins. I think that's certainly in the cards for Georgia Tech. They almost got that last year with their 5-6 record. Of course, they had the 1 cancellation against UCF, which, with the way UCF played last year, it's probably better off that game was canceled. But yeah, Georgia Tech's in a good spot. I mean, they were a halfway competent defense away from winning 8 games last year, so they can easily get over 6 this year.
I think so. I'll be shocked if they don't. And honestly, that's when you start looking at, what do we stick with Paul Johnson, or are we exploring something else? So
even with that contract extension that he has, I mean, you know how contract extensions work in college football. Don't need to explain it to you, but to the listeners out there who might think otherwise, contract extensions in college football are a fleeting thing in that you can sign one, but it doesn't really mean much of anything. These schools structure these contract extensions. They can get out of them if they need to. Paul Johnson is far from a lock from being signed for whatever it is, 2022 or 2023. If this team doesn't play well with the replacement of Ted Roof and they come in with Nate Woody and they don't perform well, there are going to be questions asked about Paul Johnson and his competence as a coach. There are, and it'll be interesting to see how that plays out.
Absolutely. Moving down, Mike. Someone's got to get bowl eligible at 5.5 wins, the win total. There's only one person I can think of that if they're really trying to hedge some bets, they should be betting the under here, and that's Pat Narduzzi. If the Pitt Panthers can't get to 6 wins this year, he should be worried because he might be looking for a new job at that point. Pitt, home against Albany, Penn State, Georgia Tech, at North Carolina, at UCF, Syracuse, at Notre Dame, Duke, at Virginia, Virginia Tech, at Wake Forest, at Miami. Now, I will say, Mike, that I was really, really confident that Pitt was going to go over 5.5 wins, and then I started looking closer at this schedule. Out of conference, it's a little bit daunting. Albany, basically a free win. Penn State at home, UCF on the road, Notre Dame on the road, not free wins. Not easy.
If they go 2-2, I think that's an accomplishment in that stretch. I'm thinking Albany and then UCF with a new coach. That's what I'm thinking as far as wins are concerned there. I think more than likely with who they're bringing back and what they're bringing back, that's more like a 1-3 stretch. And then if that's the case, in order to break 5.5 wins, you're going to have to win some of those 50-50 games you mentioned, beat a North Carolina, beat a Virginia, upset a Georgia Tech or a Virginia Tech, which Pitt has done in the past. That's what they'll have to do to break that 5.5 win barrier. They don't have an easy schedule, especially with an out-of-conference schedule that you mentioned. It's not going to be easy for Pittsburgh. It's not going to be easy for Pat Narduzzi, who's already fighting an uphill battle, in my opinion. He's had a bit of a long honeymoon with the Panthers for whatever reason. They have not been very good on defense since he arrived, which was kind of what they were going for when they hired him. It's just not a great scenario playing out for Pitt. I'm going to leave that 5.5 alone. I think they could easily be, 7-6. They could be 6-6. They could be 5-7. I'm not touching that. I would lean on the under just because I don't have a lot of confidence in that defense or that offense now post James Conner.
I'm trying to talk myself into this here, Mike. All right. Let's say wins I feel pretty dang good about if you're Pittsburgh. Albany, Syracuse, Duke, all at home, and then at Virginia. That's 4. So then you only got to win 2 more out of Penn State, Georgia Tech, at North Carolina, at UCF, at Notre Dame, Virginia Tech, at Wake Forest, at Miami.
North Carolina and Wake are probably their 2 best opportunities there, unless they're able to pull an upset against a team like UCF or Georgia Tech or Virginia Tech. Those are there are 6 games there where 5 or 6 games there where I think that they have a chance to pull an upset of sorts. There's probably only 2 of them there that I feel good about. They might even be favored in the North Carolina game. I'm not sure, but yeah, I'm leaving 5.5 alone.
Man, Pitt fans, you better you believe in Pat Narduzzi. If you're keeping him and you're not getting a bowl after a tough schedule, but come on, if he's building a program worth its salt, you've got to get to a bowl on this schedule. So.
I have no confidence in him, do you? I mean, I just don't. I'm sorry. From what I've seen,
not a ton.
Not a ton.
Pitt under Pat Narduzzi had one fantastic season, and that was because Matt Canada was calling the shots on offense. And again, like you said, I mean, there was James Conner and Nate Peterman and some of these guys that aren't there anymore and don't seem to really have been replaced in any meaningful way. So, I mean, who's to say? We'll see. Speaking of coaches, Mike, that we are in no way confident in, last but not least, or perhaps just the least, we'll just go there. At 5 wins, none other than your Virginia Cavaliers here. Going pretty hard on the under here. I don't know about you, Mike.
Yeah, under. And that's not because I'm a hater. It's because they're not any good. I mean, the team sucks. So,
well,
under.
Especially after they lost every decent player they had on the team last year. All of their playmakers left for the draft and are just gone. I don't see Bronco Mendenhall doing much anything to replace them. Now, again, start considering the schedule here. I don't think that you're at risk of going over on this schedule. I think you're at risk of pushing. But Richmond at Indiana, Ohio, Louisville, at NC State, Miami, at Duke, North Carolina, Pittsburgh, Liberty, at Georgia Tech, at Virginia Tech. I mean, it could be worse when you're scheduling games against Richmond, Ohio, and Liberty. But then again, Ohio might be better than Virginia. There's a decent chance that Richmond is too.
I was going to say they've already lost to Richmond once in the Bronco Mendenhall era. Game number 1 a couple years ago.
Well, Richmond doesn't mess around in football either.
Nope.
I don't know what they did. They've won a couple FCS championships recently, and I think they got kind of close last year too, if I'm not mistaken.
Yep. They will be replacing Kyle Lauletta, a quarterback. which is a pretty big loss. He was their star player, but always a well-coached team at the very least.
Yeah. Going to Indiana, not easy. Going to Duke, not as easy as it could be. At NC State, that's a loss. I don't know. I don't know how Virginia's getting to 5 wins on the schedule, Mike. Let me see if I can figure this out. Richmond, Ohio.
So you're hoping 2-0. They're hoping it's 3 wins.
And then you got to go 1-2, I think, against at Duke, North Carolina, and Pittsburgh in like late October.
Which they could. I mean, look, they could do, right? I mean, North Carolina, they didn't have a great year last year, obviously. A lot of injuries across the board. You know, it's still kind of up in the air at quarterback. I know they, I know that, they got Nathan Elliott. They have Chasserat still. So they got issues. They got to hammer out a quarterback. We're expecting Duke to be better than they were, but we don't really know. And then we just talked about Pitt. I mean, Pitt's a wild card, right? So Virginia can conceivably win 2 of those 3 games. If they do, I think there's a chance they can get to 6 wins.
I guess at that point, I'll believe that Bronco Mendenhall has something cooking, but I'm not seeing it just yet.
Right. I agree.
All right. Mike, those are the 5 that I felt particularly strong about. Were there any that really jumped off the page at you that were really noteworthy in your mind as you look at the rest of these?
Florida State is they're one that I want to talk about, right? So Florida State is sitting at 8.5 wins. So assuming, this is a hard assumption at this point, that DeAndre Francois gets through whatever legal issues he's combing through, and he becomes a starting quarterback once again, you feel pretty good about the upside of Florida State. But they have a new coaching staff, a lot of turnover. They have a few tough games here out of the gate. Of course, they play Miami every year. They have Clemson in the division. They have Virginia Tech, albeit at home, but Virginia Tech right off the bat in the opener. That could be 3 losses right there, potentially. And then you lose one of your remaining 8 games. And that puts you at 3 losses, right? 3 to 4, depending on what you think about the rest of the schedule. They're sitting at 8.5 wins on the over-under. I think at worst, they're 8-4 with the talent that they have on that team. But that's an interesting one. 8.5 sounds about right for Florida State because it's not an all-world talent that they have. Like last year, they entered the season, I think, number 2 or number 3 in the country. It's not that type of team this year, but they could still be pretty good, especially if they buy into what Willie Taggart's selling there at Florida State. So that's a really interesting line. I probably won't touch it. I could see it going either direction. I would lean under just because I look at their schedule, and it is a tough schedule. Because, of course, they have a team like NC State, too, who I think could give them some trouble because I still think NC State will be pretty good this year. So I'd lean under there, but that's a really, really interesting line there at 8.5 for Florida State. We'll have to see.
I agree. Crossover game against Virginia Tech, permanent rival at Miami, division game home against Clemson, out of conference at Notre Dame, permanent rival home against Florida. There's several opportunities, and like end of the first season for both Willie Taggart and Dan Mullen at Florida. Like I have no idea what that game's going to look like.
Yep.
There are a lot of opportunities to lose here. This is like a tricky, tough schedule for year 1 under Taggart, but I don't know. I'm very curious here. I'm with you. I could kind of see this going either way. I think there's enough tough games here that you lean under, but the talent is there, and just part of me, I want to lean over as well. I'm probably leaving this line alone. I think 8.5 is pretty much right, and I think you could see anything from like a 6-win season to like a 10-win season out of Florida State here. There's a lot of opportunities to be tripped up and a lot of opportunities to show off, the talent they have on that team.
And I didn't even consider the Notre Dame game. Notre Dame's going to be a top 10 or 15 team again next year. So that's another game I didn't even consider there when I was doing the rundown. But
going to South Bend.
Yeah, going to South Bend. I mean, that's not going to be an easy game. So, yeah, I could see that going either way. That's a really interesting line. Virginia Tech is also sitting at 8.5. I think that's about right. So Virginia Tech has Florida State right off the bat. Like we just mentioned, that's a 50-50 game in my opinion. Virginia Tech has Notre Dame and Miami at home, which is good because those are two of the toughest games on their schedule. And you do get them at home, which I think makes a difference rather than going on the road to South Bend, on the road to Miami, because that didn't go well for Tech last year. And it didn't go well for them, at least off the bat a couple of years ago in South Bend, and they had to storm back in the second half to come out with the victory. But 8.5 sounds about right for Virginia Tech because they drop one every year. You're not expecting them to lose, right? They lose to a Georgia Tech when the Hokies are favored. They lose a game like that. They lose to Duke. They drop one to North Carolina randomly. Like Virginia Tech always has a game on the schedule. Pitt on the road. It seems like every other year they drop that game. So there's always one game on their schedule that you're chalking up for a victory, and they come out flat and they lose. So when you couple that with the fact they have a few big games on the schedule this year, I could see them going under 8.5. I could see them going slightly over 8.5. That's another one I'd leave alone.
I think I agree with that. I'm not really too sure what to make about Virginia Tech coming into this year. They lost a lot of guys on defense, but as I've said before, when you got a guy named Foster coaching up your defense, it doesn't really matter how many guys you lose. I think they'll be just fine. But like you said, I mean, there's a lot of games that can kind of go either way for them, and they're not always a team that comes away with wins in games that they're favored in, even when they're significant favorites. I mean, again, a couple of years ago, I remember Georgia Tech beating them as a 14-point underdog, which is a significant underdog. So I figured I'd get that one in there for what that's worth. Thanks, Miami.
I'm 0-2. I'm 0-2 on the since we started this podcast against
you. Are. Georgia Tech is still the real Tech on our podcast eyes. Yeah. So that's what's important here. Miami at 9.5.
Shout out episode 1, yeah.
Absolutely. Miami at 9.5.
Who's playing quarterback?
Who's to say?
I'll leave that alone.
I'm probably leaving it alone too. I think there's upside there. They could go to 10 to 11. I think that if you held a gun to my head right now and said, hey, bet this line, I'm probably betting under, knowing that last year going, 10-1 in the regular season, I bet there were at least 3 of those games that they reasonably probably should have lost, games that they won in the last minute or so of the game. And usually by, absurd, phenomenal happenings that just, of course. But I would lean under thinking that they got a little bit lucky in a couple of spots last year and they won't get that lucky again. But, I mean, the talent is there, and there's a reason that they were in position to win those games and able to pull off the wins that they did. So, I think if you're looking to bet that, part of it is probably based on your expectation for the first game of the year, which Sunday night, right before Labor Day, they play LSU in Arlington, Texas. I actually really like Miami in that game. I don't know how good LSU is really going to be next year, and so if you're hinging everything on that, I think you're betting Miami. But overall, I question how much they can put it together and be consistent and really consistently dominate for the entire year.
Yeah, I'm leaving that alone as well. I'd lean under if Malik Rozier is going to end up being the quarterback. It looks like he is. Just because, like you said, there were some games last year that come to mind that they probably could have lost that they didn't. You think about the Georgia Tech game, North Carolina. Virginia was interesting for a while. Toledo was interesting for most of the first half. So there's 4 games right there. I know there's probably another couple in there that I'm forgetting about. But Miami made things interesting a lot more than their fans would have liked. It was actually pretty interesting. I was on social media last week, and Cam Underwood, our buddy from State of the U, and we were kind of talking to Miami fans about, hey, this is your ceiling with Malik Rozier. This is your ceiling if you try another guy, because the talent is literally there for Miami everywhere else across the board. They have talent. Mm-hmm. All the skill positions are money. You're bringing back a good, solid, young defense coached by Manny Diaz, who I still can't believe doesn't have a head coaching job. They have a really, really talented roster, but Malik Rozier has a ceiling that's extremely limited, in my opinion. And I think as long as he's the quarterback, you're going to have to live with the games where he goes 9 of 22 passing and throws 3 picks. But you take the good with the bad, right? You hope that he comes back and he throws for completes 65% of his passes for 270 and 3 touchdowns, right? So that's what you're dealing with Malik Rosier. You're going to have to take the good with the bad if you choose to go with him instead of maybe an upside of a younger player.
Mike, quickly, let's go through the rest of these. Give me some quick thoughts on a couple of these. NC State, 7 wins.
Yeah, you said quickly. I'd leave that alone. They are bringing back Ryan Finley, so for what it's worth, you have an incumbent starter quarterback. I'd lean over, but you are replacing Bradley Chubb on defense, which, big wild card. He's a good player.
Well, and it was pointed out, too, not only you're replacing Bradley Chubb, you're replacing a lot of guys that were drafted in the first 3 rounds of the draft.
Yeah. Yep.
You're telling me that this team was struggling to go more than, 8-4, 9-3 with all those dudes? What are they going to do when they're not, when they're not there? Is this a 7-win team? 7 is probably on the high end of what I would expect, but I think I'm leaving that alone. If anything, I would probably bet the under.
Fair.
All right. Wake Forest, 6.5.
I don't know what this offense looks like without John Wolford. I know it's insane to say. He was so good last year. But you have Kendall Hinton. He's an experienced guy, quarterback. I'd lean over there. I think they can get to 7. They can potentially get to 8. They're going to be well coached under Dave Clawson. We know that. But John Wolford was a great equalizer last year with how well he played. So without him, it could really go anywhere from 5 wins to 8 wins. There's a pretty high variance without him under center, in my opinion.
Sneaky, dangerous game to start the year here for Wake Forest at Tulane. Tulane might be low-key pretty good this year, so be careful there. Yeah, there is a lot of uncertainty in the post-John Wolford era. Who's to say how good Kendall Hinton or anybody else will be there running that offense for the Steamin' Deeks? That said, as much as we've ever expressed concern over Dave Clawson's Wake program, I mean, they've always pretty consistently performed. So, again, as we go through the last few of these, I'm not betting any of these, but if you held a gun to my head, what would I do? Probably betting you over, just knowing that they are a well-coached team, and there's a couple teams that they'll jump up and we'll say surprise, even though it may not be as much of a surprise to Wake fans or some others.
Right.
Boston College, 6 wins.
Scott Loeffler, run the football. I'm going to take the over here.
Damn it. I was thinking hard over on this, almost would swap this in for, Pittsburgh or something, except then you mentioned Scott Loeffler, and man, that's a lot of trust to put in Scott Loeffler.
You don't have to tell me, buddy.
Yeah. If you're telling me that I'm getting my money back if Boston College finishes 6-6, I'm probably betting the over. I think that they'll be competent enough to make this all work for another 6 to 7 wins. Maybe tumble your way into an 8-win season or something like that, which I would not push back. I wouldn't put past Steve Adazio for a second.
You always make a bowl game under Steve Adazio, so you're at least going to have a chance to get to 7. So I think I'd lean over just on that premise.
You want to gouge your eyes out, but you're making a bowl game, so you can only complain so much. Duke, 6 wins.
I'm going to say under. That's not an easy one, though. We're all expecting Duke to bounce back, but, they are losing playmakers. They don't have Sean Wilson at running back anymore. We're expecting Daniel Jones to be better, right? Because we were expecting him to be really, really good last year. Coming off of what we were impressed with his freshman year, he was really, really good. He took a step back last year. The offense as a whole took a step back and regressed. Everybody's expecting him to be better. I don't buy it. I think they leaned on Sean Wilson a lot last year to get what they could out of that offense. They still have Britton Brown, who was productive as a freshman, so you lean on him a little bit if he's healthy, but I'm going to lean under here. I think there'll be some sort of bounce back, but there's only so much talent to go around. And Duke wasn't very good on defense last year either, and there's no reason to think that that's going to improve.
Out of the gate, Mike, listen to this out-of-conference stretch. Army at Northwestern at Baylor. What are the odds that Duke goes 0-3 against that stretch?
I think 1-2, right? I think
that's what you expect, but I think 0-3 is on the table.
Yep.
Any of those programs you're able to lose to, especially going on the road to Baylor and on the road to Northwestern. Duke, you got to be careful you don't find yourself in an 0-3 hole, just to start the year. That would really put the 6, going over 6 really in a lot of jeopardy here. So be careful there.
And Army and Northwestern are good teams, and I think Baylor is going to be a lot better in year 2 under Matt Rule.
I think so too. North Carolina, 6 wins.
Well, they were what? They were 3-9 last year, right?
That sounds right. Yeah.
Yeah. I think they can get to 6 if everybody's healthy. They have to have consistent play out of the quarterback position. Yeah.
What is it with all these ACC coastal teams scheduling UCF all of a sudden?
Hey, Virginia Tech hasn't done it, thankfully, because that's a game they would definitely try to lose.
Mm-hmm.
UCF's good, man. I don't care who the coach is.
That's the game that Georgia Tech didn't play last year, and they would have gotten beat.
Yeah, they would have definitely gotten beat, and there's nothing to be ashamed of there because they're the only undefeated national champions, Joey. As you know.
National champions.
Yep. I don't even know. Push on 6 wins for North Carolina. I know that's cheating. I don't really know what to expect out of this team. They were so injured last year that it's really hard to get a gauge on just how bad they really were. I mean, there were so many guys playing that were not ready yet. I do think that'll benefit them this year. So I guess if I had to guess, I'd lean over. But I don't know. 4 wins, 5 wins, 7 wins. I think it's all on the table.
Yeah, I think if, again, gun to the head, I think I'm going over, but who's to say? I mean, at the very least, there should be a lot of depth on this team from last year. The fact that you had a lot of guys playing that weren't ever expected to play last year. So I guess we'll go over, but again, who knows? There's a lot of different ways that this team could go, so we'll see. Last one, Mike, the bottom of the win projections for the ACC. Our buddies over at Syracuse, the Orange, 4.5 wins. Come on, Dino.
I want to believe in them so bad, too.
Mm-hmm.
I do. I texted you this. We were talking about Syracuse a little bit, you and I. When these win totals came out last week, we were texting. I think there's a higher likelihood that Eric Dungy misses 4.5 games than Syracuse wins 4.5 games, right? Gets to 5 or gets to 6, if Dungy's healthy, I think they can get to 5 or 6 wins. And that means that one of these other ACC teams is definitely hitting the under. But if Eric Dungy can't stay healthy and has to shoulder the load both in the passing game and the running game, which has gotten him into trouble with his injuries in the past, then I just don't see them winning more than 4 games. Do you? I want them to so bad. I want this Dino Babers thing to work. It's just, I don't know. I don't want to bail on them too early, but I have my doubts just based off of what I've seen so far.
Yeah, there's basic data that there's a major problem with Syracuse, and it's that Syracuse without Eric Dungy can't win games. They have not proven that they can win games without Eric Dungy under Dino Babers. Eric Dungy has not proven that he can stay healthy for a full season under Dino Babers, and not through any faults of his own. It's pretty much because he is like a one-man wrecking crew that eventually the body just gives up. He doesn't get any help, I think, a lot of times from the offensive line, from guys getting open, anything like that. And so his body ends up taking such a toll that nobody could expect him to stay healthy. And so that's the thing. If you're betting me over here, you're probably betting that Eric Dungy's going to stay healthy, which
no guarantees.
None. No, I mean, I hope he does, but I don't know how I could sit here and say I expect him to. I'm with you, man. I want this Dino Babers thing to work here at Syracuse, but it's not looking great so far. So here's to hoping. Out of conference at Western Michigan. I think you can win that game.
Should.
Home against Wagner, home against Connecticut, and then home against Notre Dame. Well, I say home. It's at Yankee Stadium, but
3-1.
I think so. Yeah, you need to go 3-1. You need to beat Connecticut, beat Western Michigan, beat Wagner.
And all you need is 2 wins.
Get 2-6 in ACC play. You can go over. All right, I ride with Syracuse. We're going over here.
Okay, that's fair.
All right,
we'll see.
Mike, we just talked for like 45 minutes about ACC sports gambling in
I love it.
Mid-May.
It's all going to be legal soon.
That is what this podcast was meant for. Let's talk about not gambling for a second. What's going on with you? How you been? What you been up to?
Good. I am going on vacation in a week. Going on a family vacation, going on a cruise. But it's not a conventional cruise to the Bahamas or something like that. We're going over to Barcelona, and then taking a nice little cruise from Barcelona through Nice, France, and all through Italy, going to Venice, Rome, Florence. Should be really good. Montenegro we're also hitting, which is kind of random, but hitting that entire coastline, so that should be really, really good. Excited about that. It's going to be a nice 2-week getaway. So that's coming up here next week, and I'm going to be back in the States on June the 8th. So we'll have a couple weeks here without a podcast, which bummer for all of you. But Joey and I have only been recording once every few weeks anyway, so shouldn't miss a beat when I get back.
Damn, you fancy! Look at that world traveler status you're bringing back here.
Bringing it back. That's what we do.
That's good.
So, yeah.
Is the girlfriend going with you?
It's not. She's starting graduate school down at Tech, actually. So she's getting
Virginia Tech.
Yeah, the real Tech.
Scoreboard.
Yeah. Right. Okay. Well, I have nothing to say about that one yet. Hopefully this podcast goes for a few more years, and then maybe I'll have something.
One day.
Yeah. One of our two teams made a bowl game last year. Yeah.
Hey.
Okay.
Thanks,
anyway.
Ted Roof.
Yeah. Anyway. Yeah. So she's going back to school, going back to Blacksburg. So
cool.
Ready for that, so I'll be good. Yep.
Very cool. Living the bachelor life on a cruise ship for a couple weeks in Europe. Not bad.
Something like that.
We'll be going to Greece later this year. It'll actually be in like mid-August. So a couple of our preview podcasts might end up being pre-recorded so that I can not play road shows from Eastern Europe.
That'll be that's difficult. We've done road shows in the past. That one would be by far the most difficult.
We even tried an international road show at one point, and it went very poorly.
The Jamaican one?
Thanks to sketchy Jamaican internet. But
that was amazing. That was also one of the most amazing podcasts we've ever done. So, I mean, there are two ways to look at it. You were hammered, and the internet sucked, but we made do, and it was awesome. That was one of my favorite podcasts.
The unlimited cheap, I'll say the unlimited free cheap quality booze in the room really gave that one an extra little kick in the pants to get going. So
yes.
Not bad. Yeah, I'll try to avoid the logistical mess of trying to record a podcast from Greece, not knowing what island I'll be on or what. I don't know. We'll try to avoid that. But anyways, that'll be later in the summer for me. Well, Mike, that sounds like fun. Enjoy that trip. We will probably end up coming back to record afterwards once you're back. Is there anything else that you wanted to hit on before you leave, or just figure that we've done enough for one night? Should
we talk real quick about AJ Gray and Jake Sickler?
Oh, we should. I totally forgot about that. Yeah, bit of Georgia Tech news dropped last week. Not super surprising to find out that Jake Stickler, his career is over. He was a medical disqualification. He dealt with a lot of concussions in his career and eventually just decided to hang him up. And good that he gets to do that on his own terms. Hate to hear it for him. It's a tough thing to have to do, tough decision to make. But at the very least, hopefully he's got a degree that he's able to fall back on now that his football career is about to be over. In much more surprising news, returning safety AJ Gray, a multi-year starter coming back for Georgia Tech, really high potential, very promising player on the defense. Also a medical DQ we had coming off of spring practice. Gray was found to have a certain heart condition that basically immediately made it so that he can't play anymore. It's just unsafe for him to be exerting himself and playing a high impact, high stress game like football. And so all of a sudden, just in the blink of an eye, his career is over. This is, I believe, the third player under Paul Johnson's tenure that has had some sort of medical oddity that has ended their career prematurely. The first was Denzel McCoy back in 2010. He was a 4-star defensive tackle, really a very promising, highly rated defensive player that he never played a down at Georgia Tech for the same reason of some sort of heart defect or heart condition that caused his career to be over. And then later, a few years later, Jalen Ratliff, the quarterback out of North Carolina, had an ATV accident. was in a coma, I think, nearly died, and eventually had a plate inserted in his head. They had to remove a significant portion of his skull. Obviously, that was a condition that he ended up having his career ended over as well. Both guys ended up being able to go to school at Georgia Tech and in a lot of ways stay around the football program. I know Ratliff in particular worked in sort of an analyst, maybe sort of capacity, but, helping to keep a play sheet for Johnson in the spring game and do some things like that. So they're still very much welcomed around the program. They get to go to school and do all those things, but just a sad way to end their career. AJ Gray and Jake Stickler now also having their careers ended through medical hardships. So thoughts and prayers with them and their families as they kind of move on into different endeavors in life. But again, it's at the very least, it's kind of nice that AJ was able to end things, I'll say on his own terms, not necessarily, but that both guys were able to kind of salvage their health in the long term and hopefully make very strong, promising careers out of whatever they're able to get into. So shout out to Jake Stickler and AJ Gray.
Yeah, I mean, good luck to them, right?
Yeah.
At least they have their health. I mean, the most important thing is they have their health to the degree where they can still live normal lives outside of football, and I think that's the most important thing at this point.
Yep. Yeah, they get to grow up and have families and have a career and do all those things. So, hey, at least there's that, and that's definitely not nothing. So good on them. Mike, I think that's all I got. You have anything else?
I think we're good at this point. This is a good long podcast. I think we covered a lot, at least for an off-season, an off-season pod. I think we had a good amount of content here. Shout out to BetDSI for putting out win totals, giving us something to talk about. So,
no kidding. Yeah, I think this is a lot longer than I expected. We went for a while on specifically football things for mid-May, but hey, it's been a good day, like we said. Mike, let's go ahead and move on here. We'll come back here in a few weeks once you're back from vacation. But in the meantime, they can find us on Twitter. I am at FTRS Joey. He is at Mike McDaniel CFB, and together we're at BC Podcast ACC. Y'all can send us an email to the longest email address known to man, basketballconferencepodcast@gmail.com.
Nailed it.
Yeah, and we haven't got an email in a while. So again, if you send us anything on the email, I think we're pretty much obligated to read it at this point. So if y'all want us to talk about anything and anything,
our email
please.
shuts down. Our email shuts down soon, right? Is that how it works?
I think so. Yeah, it's getting a little bit out of use, and we were getting those. Hey, if you don't pay the power bill, it's going to be turned off here soon. So please help us keep our email running. Send us something. Sure. We're running out of power. I guess we'll go with that.
Yeah.
Mike, they can find us on iTunes, Google Play, SoundCloud, the Overcast app, and wherever fine podcasts are sold for free. Where else can they find us on the social medias, Mike?
Facebook.com/basketballconference. Rate, review, find all of our podcasts there. And, of course, rate and review us and all the other options that Joey laid out there where you can listen to us. We read all of them, trying to find ways to get better. Also, please, with the emails, drop us content ideas. If there's something you want to talk about here in the off season, Joey and I are all ears because, we did the best we can, but we're open to all suggestions.
Yeah, no doubt. Please send over any ideas, any topics you want to hear us talk about. We'd be happy to go over anything. Mike, they can also find us on YouTube if they so choose. We have a channel. Just go search for Basketball Conference Podcast on YouTube, and we are posting some live streams of our recordings there, so go check those out. And Mike, I think that's about it. Anything else before we get on out of here?
I think we're good, Joey.
All right. Well, enjoy your cruise, and we'll talk later, and I guess get some sort of recap on how it all went.
Sure. Yeah, man.
All right. Well, until next time, for Mr. Mike McDaniel, I am Joey Weaver. Thank you guys so much for listening. We'll talk to you again soon. And until then, go ACC.